All right, I'm Doug Sutherland, and I'm a member of the Democracy for America Fairfield County chapter. I'm a retired telecommunications engineer, and I ran for state rep in the last cycle. And I'm kind of a grassroots organizer for events like this. So I just kind of want to start off, setting a little context here, why we're here. We're not here because we're opposing trade. I think everybody would agree that we have a globalized economy now, and most of our potential customers are outside our borders, so we all support international trade. But we think that the TPP has the potential for damaging American jobs and damaging our environment, damaging our food safety, and actually damaging the sovereignty of our democracy. So this is why we're here. We're here because we care about American jobs, and we care about American working families. We care about our environment, we care about food safety, and we care about our democracy. So that's why we've created a coalition of environmental and labor groups. It's called the Connecticut Fair Trade Coalition. So it's fair trade, not free trade. So just to get us going a little bit here, I'd like to try something here. When I say fast track, you say no. Fast track.
No!
Fast track.
No!
When I say fair trade, you say yes. Fair trade.
Yes!
Fair trade.
Yes!
When I say free trade, you say no. Free trade.
No!
Free trade.
No!
Fast track.
Yes!
Fast track. Fair trade.
Yes!
Free trade.
No!
All right. So I think we're all on the same page there. So I want to start off with I want to start off with a little bit of the breaking news on fast track and where things stand down in Congress. There was supposed to be a ministerial meeting in March to kind of finalize a lot of the wording in the treaty. That has been now pushed back to April. Japan apparently is still, not agreeing to give access to their auto industry and to their agricultural market. Part of the reason they're not giving into that is right now we don't have a fast track bill. So they're not trusting that if they give up something, we'll sign off on it. So the fact that you guys are here and we're pushing back on fast track is slowing this whole thing down, which is a great thing.
All right.
So, yeah, okay. But the fast track bill is coming, and it originally we thought it was going to be introduced early this coming week. It may be on Friday, but there's dissension among the leadership in the Finance Committee. Orrin Hatch is the new Republican chairman of the Finance Committee. The ranking member is Ron Wyden, who was the chairman, and they're not in agreement on what this bill is supposed to look like. And the people in Oregon, where Wyden is from, are not at all happy about the situation, and he doesn't want Hatch to bring the bill until they have an agreement on what's going to be in it. So we have to keep the pressure on, and it appears that Jim Himes is probably one of the few members of our congressional delegation that is still leaning the wrong way. I think almost every other member of our delegation, senators and congressmen, have real questions about this if they haven't come out strongly against it. So I think 80% of the Democrats in Congress are against it. I think I've heard there's only about 10 Democrats that even say they're for it. So we want to make sure that Jim is not one of those 10 or 15 that are voting the wrong way. So that said, I'm going to introduce some of our speakers here. All right, why don't I start first with Jim Dean, because he's got some more information about what I just said. So Jim Dean is the chairman of Democracy for America, which I'm told is the largest political action committee.
Yes,
no, it's not?
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, tell people it is. And so they're committed to grassroots, increasing grassroots participation and recruiting and electing fiscally responsible and socially progressive candidates at all levels of government. So it's a great group. And so, Jim, take it away.
All right, folks. Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of an old thing that we used to have on our website, but bottom line is Democracy for America has been around for about 10 years. It was started actually by my brother Howard Dean. For those of you who might have been doing some work in Iowa in the 2004 presidential campaign, you probably remember him. For those of you who weren't happy about the Iraq War back in 2003, you probably remember him. But we got about 1 million members around the country, and we are very committed to making sure that fast track does not happen, and we are extremely committed to making sure that we stop this ploy, really what is to gain corporate control over the global economy and even our political process. And if it's not enough that the Koch brothers are out there and a lot of other people are trying to buy off Congress and buy off our state legislatures, this treaty that people keep talking about is exactly that kind of thing. It's going to put in intellectual property protections for big business, which is actually going to cost us jobs here among small businesses who rely on internet to do global commerce. It is going to give corporations enormous power over the regulations that our government has to keep them well behaved. And you don't have to take my word for this. This actually happened under NAFTA. Back in the 90s, I remember I was tootling through Canada, and I'm listening to this radio station tell me about this guy who wanted to take water out of the Great Lakes and export it. So the Canadian government said no. And instead of saying, all right, well, I guess that's the law and that's it, he actually was able to take his case to a 3-person tribunal of 3 people who nobody had ever heard of, who had absolutely no accountability at all, and it was left up to them as to whether this guy was going to be able to take water, a taxpayer-owned asset, out of the Great Lakes. And as it turns out, they ruled against him, but the fact of the matter is, when we're up against a person, a 3-person or 10-person tribunal to make these kinds of decisions, our assets, our taxpayer-owned assets are at risk. And that's not the least to talk about the fact about the trade deficits have skyrocketed ever since we got it at NAFTA, which is not good for job creation. This is a bill, a treaty that kills jobs more than anything else. So look, I happen to live in Connecticut. I'm very grateful for the chance to be here. I'm a lot more grateful that all of you showed up here to make your voices heard. We've supported Jim Himes in the past. I think he is a fine and decent human being. And I certainly wouldn't say anything bad about him in that way, but I believe that he has to do the right thing and vote against fast track. And just to make it clear on exactly what that means, Democracy for America actually ran a little poll in Oregon earlier this week before Senator Wyden started pushing back on the bill and pushing back on Orrin Hatch's attempts to get a fast track bill passed. And in that poll, we were asking voters about their 2-term senator who is on his way and should be on his way to sailing his way to victory, except for one problem, and that is fast track. Overwhelmingly, 73% of the voters in Oregon oppose giving the president fast track authority. Overwhelmingly, 63% of the voters in Oregon have an unfavorable view of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is this treaty. Over 60% think these trade deals have cost American jobs, which of course they have, as we all know. And probably the most important statistic at all that Congressman Himes really needs to know, that 50% of the voters are less likely to vote for Ron Wyden, a 2-term senator, if he sides with the Republicans in supporting the fast track and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So with that in mind, this can happen here to anybody in Congress or any other state if those folks in Congress, particularly Democrats, are going to side with the Republicans and vote through fast track. And it is extremely important that all of us, our friends, our family, and our neighbors, call Congressman Himes' office. He will not go unless we tell them that this is a bad move, that he should vote against fast track, that he should vote with the working families of Connecticut, particularly in the 4th District, where it's a very expensive place to live and a very tough place for folks who work for a living to live. He needs to vote against the fast track bill and vote down this Trans-Pacific Partnership. So please make your voices heard. Please call his office. Please get your folks, friends, family, and neighbors to do the same thing. And if we do, he'll understand this, he will hear us, and I think he'll do the right thing and vote this thing down. So thanks again for being here, but the work lies ahead, and let's make it happen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Excellent. All right, so next I'm going to bring up John Harrity. John is the president of the Connecticut State Council of Machinists, which is a branch of the International Association of Machinists, and they work to protect and promote the interest of working families through the political process, right? Okay, so take it away, John.
Hey, good afternoon. All right, so listen, 20 years ago, we were told that NAFTA was going to bring jobs to the U.S. And now it's 20 years later, we've had a lot of these free trade agreements, which are all structured around the idea of protecting companies when they move our jobs overseas. They're all about protecting capital and intellectual property. There's nothing about jobs in these agreements. 20 years later, in Connecticut, we've lost 96,000 manufacturing jobs. 96,000. Now you take a look at Bridgeport. Bridgeport used to be a factory town. Bridgeport used to be part of the muscle of America, and it's abandoned now. The plant where my father worked for 44 years, General Electric, and thousands of people came out of there every day, that plant, it's not even empty, it is gone. It has been torn down to the last brick. And so we've got to ask ourselves, if NAFTA didn't work, if the Korea Free Trade Agreement didn't work, if all these other free trade agreements didn't work, what is it about TPP that's different? And what we can see is nothing. Nothing is different. It's the same old deal. And you remember, there used to be, and maybe there still is in the newspapers, there's a comic strip called Peanuts with Charlie Brown. And there was a character named Lucy. And Lucy would put that football, and she said to Charlie Brown, "Go ahead and kick the football, Charlie Brown. I'm not going to move it this time." And Charlie Brown would say every time, "Oh, I don't know, you moved it the last time." And she'd say, "Oh, no, honest, this time I'm not going to move it." And then he'd go to kick the ball, and she'd swipe it away. Well, that's what it's like with these free trade agreements. They keep telling us, this one means jobs. The last one didn't, but this one does. How about it? Come on, take a kick at it. You know, I'm not going to fool you this time. Well, I tell you what, we may be a bunch of working people. We may look stupid to them, but we're not stupid. You know, anybody walking down the street on the main street of Bridgeport, you ask them, do these trade agreements result in more jobs or less jobs? And they can tell you, and they're right. They're more right than all the statisticians and all the economists and all the business leaders that have gathered in secret in order to put this trade deal together. So we're not buying it. And I tell you what, why don't we have demonstrations in front of 7 offices today, all of the congressional delegation, plus our 2 senators? Because Congressman Himes is the only one who's saying, I don't know, I think I may vote for this thing. Now that's a problem. This guy, he comes out of the world of finance. He knows international trade and finance. You know, he's no dummy either. And I've met with him, I don't know how many times, as have a lot of us. And he keeps saying, I'm looking at it, I'm looking at it. Well, guess what? It's time to stop looking at it. It's time to vote with the people, vote against Fast Track, and vote against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, John. Next, I'm going to bring up Rocco Kalo, who's with the Teamsters at Sikorsky.
All right.
Thanks, Bob. Listen, I just think it's really important that we keep stressing we're not opposed to trade. Okay, we are in a global economy. We have to trade in order to survive. We also got to keep in mind that we are not asking Congressman Himes to change his position on trade. We're asking him simply to vote no against Fast Track. Let the bill come to the floor. Let Congress discuss it. let's make the amendments to it that we need to so it works for everybody. As Don said in his opening remarks, we talk about places like Japan who are waiting to see what happens here. They won't give up access to their agricultural markets or their auto markets because they're protecting their workers. As Don said, I represent the people at Sikorsky Aircraft, and as early as yesterday, I've had meetings with the company talking about a turkey program that we just won. But in the negotiations for that program, the Turks make sure that their workers are taken care of. They're going to buy our product, but we're going to have to give them some work. We're going to have to transition some work to them. They take care of their own. I find it appalling that we have to stand out here and ask our elected officials to do the right thing for the American worker. Okay, it's getting to the point where it's ridiculous. Everybody talks about these Buy American provisions. TPP passes, they're gone. They're gone. There's nothing more un-American than that. So it is important, and I appreciate everybody giving up their Saturday to come out here and do this, but we need to keep the pressure on. We need to keep the pressure on this guy across the street to make sure he does the right thing. We're the ones who put the money in his pocket so he could campaign. We're the ones who put the boots on the ground. We did the door knockings. We did everything we had to do to get him elected, and we did it because when it comes to something like this, we need his help. We were there for him, and he needs to be here for us. So please, let's keep the pressure on until we get the right thing done here. Thank you.
Thanks, Rocco. All right, next I'm going to bring up John Bartow, who knows firsthand what it's like to compete against foreign competition under these free trade agreements. John is the former president of Ansonia Metals, and they lost a battle with foreign competition on rod and wire business. Lost 200 jobs, right?
North of that.
Okay, more than 200 jobs went down eventually. He was most recently Rosa DeLauro's guest at the President's State of the Union address. And while you were down there, I understand you were protesting against the TPP.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So take it away.
Thank you guys very much. It's an honor to be here this morning. It's very cold, and I think it just goes to show your commitment to your constitutional rights to come out here and support the effort against TPP and the effort against fast tracking. Guys, my story is real. It hits home. We're not a company that's in trouble. We're a company that's gone. We had 400 jobs in 2002. NAFTA, and most recently, the Korean-U.S. Free Trade Agreement decimated our business and killed all of those jobs, and they will never come back to this country. We were a supplier to the United States Navy for over 70 years. Now they're buying product from Mexico and Korea with our taxpayer dollars. I can't think of anything more offensive than that. All of our displaced workers are being funded by our taxpayer dollars. Okay, so we're getting this problem twice. And we fortunately have some leadership in this state that get it and are willing to do something about it and are willing to fight against the TPP and the fast track. Unfortunately, we have one here that needs to follow the leadership that Rosa DeLauro and others have put forth on this matter. If we don't do something now, we're going to see my story proliferate itself over and over and over again in all of our jobs, good manufacturing jobs. And I'll say this, it's a destruction of the pathway that manufacturing jobs create. And it's not just manufacturing, that just hits home with me, but it's a good paying job with wages, and it allows for saving for retirement. That's gone. For people that haven't gone to college, that pathway is being eradicated from this country, and it's because of stupid deals like this. And hey, history's our teacher. We've seen what NAFTA's done. We've seen what the Korean-U.S. Free Trade Agreement has done. None of it has done what we were led to believe would happen. Oh, it's going to create jobs. Oh, it's going to create revenue. It's going to be wonderful. The data is there. The history is there. And we have to put a stop to this trend. It's getting to the point of ridiculous. I echo the words of Rocco. He couldn't have said it better. Guys, let's get behind this. we're with you, and vote no on this, Congressman Himes. Thank you all.
Thanks, John. All right, next I'm going to bring up Will Wilkins. I see him. Will is a partner with Ken Davis, who was the former Assistant Secretary of Commerce under the Nixon administration, and they've got a group called the Balanced Trade Associates, and they're dedicated to ending America's trade deficit by replacing excessive imports with increased domestic manufacturing and other high-value-added industries. And he's also the owner and operator of Made in the USA Solar in Oxford. So I think that name kind of speaks for itself. So Will, thanks for coming down here.
Thanks, Doug. And it's good to see so many people out here that care about our country. I'm an electrician by trade, and I have to buy power tools. I buy Milwaukee brand. It's a good American brand, now made in China. That is so sad. That's the only alternative. They're all made in China now. So Made in USA Solar can't find American-made tools. It's hard for us to find American-made components for the systems that we build. We will only install American-made components, but we've lost about 5 brands now in the last 4 years. These are 5 long-standing American brands that are now either bankrupt or made in China. So we have a real crisis. This is just a couple tiny examples. We have a real crisis in our country about the loss of manufacturing. John Bartow just spoke about how important the manufacturing jobs are in particular. That's because manufacturing is where wealth is created. Manufacturing is different from the other sectors of the economy because it has a multiplier effect that no other sector has. Manufacturing will bring us all the supply chains. It will bring us all the services that support it, from accountants to engineers and designers to janitors to shipping. You name it, manufacturing is at the core of any modern economy, and we're losing it. We're becoming a third world country. Talk about our trade deficits for a minute. There's a million examples, but the statistics are what counts them. Last year, we had a goods trade deficit of $722 billion. That means we imported $722 billion of goods more than we exported. Did you know that since NAFTA, January 1st, 1994, our trade deficits have amounted to just under $11 trillion. That means we don't have a demand problem in this country. We have a lot of demand, and it's not being satisfied by American workers and American industries. If that $11 trillion since NAFTA that leaked out of our country in trade deficits, if that $11 trillion had been spent on American-made goods, do you know what a different country we would have today? That it would be a transformed country. We would not have the division of wealth. We would not have the loss of our pensions, of our jobs. It's impossible to overestimate the damage that free trade is doing to our country. And maybe that's enough for now. We have to stop it.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. Thanks. All right, I'm going to quickly read a statement. Nisha Swinton is with Food and Water Watch in New England, and she could not make it here today, but she sent this statement. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is a new, quote, free trade agreement being negotiated between the U.S. and 11 other Pacific Rim countries. Like other free trade agreements, this one is basically a permanent power grab by corporations and financial companies that will make it impossible for the citizens of countries joining the TPP to choose what laws and rules they want to live under. For Americans, it would lead to increased gas exports and increased imported foods while undermining our domestic laws and increasing the financialization of nature. TPP was started under George W. Bush, but it is being pushed hard by President Obama. In fact, a bill in Congress would give him fast-track authority for the negotiating, meaning that he and whoever comes after him would be able to negotiate as desired without oversight from Congress. isn't the reason our Constitution created 3 federal branches, executive, judicial, and legislative, to ensure checks and balances. In reality, the TPP is a power grab by corporations and their financiers. The TPP, if enacted, would take critical oversight of issues like food safety, fossil fuel development, and fracking away from locally affected communities and place it in the hands of international treaties. The TPP is not in the citizens' best interest. All right, so now I'm going to call up James Root to speak a little bit on the constitutionality of Fast Track. James has worked for Veterans for Peace, MoveOn.org, 350.org, Occupy Danbury. So he's going to speak to us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Doug. I came to work with this coalition through Occupy Danbury. I do live up there, but I do work in Wilton, which is in the 4th District. And we are trying to influence Jim Himes, as I said. What I'm going to say here is a little abstract and a little bit of a lecture compared to what you've been hearing, but I just wanted to remind everyone interested in here that there are constitutional issues involved with this issue, that, in fact, Fast Track, the legal mechanism, the only legal mechanism that could get through a treaty like this, is a deviation from what the framers of the Constitution intended. There's the Commerce Clause in the 4th article, I believe, in the Constitution, which specifically prohibits or designates Congress as the only people who can create treaties like this, commercial treaties with other nations. The executive branch can create political treaties, but the money part has to be made with the Congress. And over a couple of centuries, this has deteriorated the situation. And the upshot of that for me is this, that we should not let other parties paint us as radicals, and that on this issue we're actually the conservatives, and we're only trying to reclaim what was once ours. So again, this is illegal, and it's a helpful framing for me anyway. That's about it. So our goal here, legally, I mean, we need to keep up the rhetoric and keep up the pressure. We really have no choice otherwise. But legally, we need to keep insisting on redoing the whole framework. We need a new trade delegation authority, an entirely new process for that. There has to be a structural change on top of the rhetorical change. And anyway, that's just helpful. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, James. All right, after what you've heard so far, when I say fast track,
No.
when I say fair trade,
Yes.
when I say free trade,
No.
all right. All right, so we're about to wrap up here. We handed out some literature here to you. There was a data sheet which showed some of the things that have happened in Connecticut since NAFTA and what some of these free trade agreements have done to us. We've lost 96,000 manufacturing jobs since 1994. 22,000 jobs have been certified by a labor program as being directly related to trade agreements. We've lost our trade deficit with Korea has grown 22% since the Korean Free Trade Agreement was signed. So hopefully, and the bottom line down here is that income inequality has increased over that period of time because wages have been suppressed by these agreements. So that is not good for anybody. So look at that data. I've also handed out an action sheet, which on the back has some actions that I'd like everybody to take here. We don't want this to end right here when we all go home. We want to have you call Representative Himes and tell him how you feel. Let him know that you're concerned about this issue. His phone number is on the sheet, so please let him know how you feel and tell him. I mean, Jim's a good guy. He's a thoughtful guy. He's a friend of mine for a long time, and I think if we all let him know how we feel, he will do the right thing. So, is there anybody else here that would like to say a few words before we wrap up? No? All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out on this cold morning. It's a great turnout. And go home, tell your friends, your family, and make that call to Jim Himes next week. So, thanks a lot.